And welcome back to the Space Arena, Ground Arena Saga podcast, where we cover Star Wars Unlimited from the ground up into space. The following clip is taken from episode 28 of the show, and this was excerpted specifically for you folks who don't want to sit through the whole show and just want to see the new cards. So if you like what we're doing here, be sure to check out episode 28 of the Space Arena, Ground Arena podcast. But for now, here are the new cards. Okay, so that brings us to the end of cards that have been revealed by other folks, but we're not yet done because we have a couple more cards we need to talk about, and these are cards that are going to be revealed by us. Guild Target. This is a zero cost aggression affiliated upgrade. It gives +0/+0. The attached unit gains bounty. Deal 2 damage to a base. If this unit is unique, deal 3 damage instead.
I think it's a pretty cool bounty that you could play when you're looking to trade units to get a little bit more payoff off of getting that trade because you're also now dealing damage to base. And if you would have this on a unit and then you hit it with Overwhelm, you can get even more damage through the base. So I think it's cool. Again, we got to see how relevant bounties are, but I think one that gives you a payoff for trading into a unit by dealing extra damage to base is cool. I like it.
I
Dan?
agree. I think it'll work really well with overwhelm units, but typically, like low costing cards that deal damage to base are wanted by aggression decks or aggressive decks, not aggression the aspect, but like go to face decks. And those decks don't really like to trade into units unless they have overwhelm. So while this will be great with K2SO and the Mandalorian we saw earlier, that's the 3/3 with overwhelm, I'm not sure it's going to have a real good home in a lot of aggressive decks. It does mean that it makes it harder for your opponent to trade into your like aggro units, right? So if they do decide to trade into you and lose their body, you still get some free damage. But it seems to be not a super high payoff for the card out of your hand for an aggression player.
I like that this card's zero cost because that means it can fit into an aggro archetype and it's not pulling resources away from getting units on board dealing damage. Like Sabine can keep doing Sabine things. And now here's a card, maybe most of the time you row it because things don't line up, but on those turns where you have the action economy where you can throw this down on a unit, yeah, I agree. If you're on aggro, you do not want to trade into a unit. You don't have any interest in doing that, but you know your opponent does. You know your opponent wants to hit your units. And I like the idea of giving them this sort of disincentivizing bounty. It's like, well, I could remove that unit, but then I'm going to take 3 more damage and lose my guy. Okay. Maybe I'll try to race the aggro player instead of trading. So this is the kind of card that puts mental pressure on your opponent to take the line that's more favorable to you as the aggro player. I think that's cool. I like the idea that this is a no-cost upgrade that you could, in a real nasty pinch, throw down on one of your units that's going to get some kind of a buff from being upgraded. I like the idea of bounties being free. And I like that this one isn't something that your opponent can play around. You know, we've seen some bounties where it's like ready resources. Well, if all your resources are ready when the bounty gets triggered, that feels terrible. There's no playing around this one. If all the base is on the damage, you already won. Or all the damage is on the base, you've already won. So this is a bounty where your payoff, unless they just straight up defeat the upgrade somehow, and even that, if you're playing a confiscate or a Fang Fighter to get rid of this bounty, I don't feel too bad about that either. So out of the bounties we've seen, I feel like this one has the most reliable value, and I can see the most use cases for it because damage is just so much more reliable than, or so much more important than a lot of the other things we've seen bounties do. I'm gonna try to say this. So this is a 5 cost aggression villainy affiliated ground unit, and his name is Stanton. Stanton, I think. He is a 3/7 with a wind plate. If an enemy unit has a bounty, you may ready this unit. And on attack, choose a ground unit. You may deal 1 damage to it for each damage on this unit.
Well, I think he's pretty cool. I'm waiting for my 2-cost Wookiee tribal card now to go with Gentle Giant and Chewbacca. That'll be sweet. Um, His when played ability is going to be relevant, right? It'll be nice to get this unit ready on turn 5, especially if you're playing a bounty heavy deck with someone like Bosk or something like that. His on attack will be cool, but he's going to have to sustain damage and live for that to matter. So I think that we'll see how that works out. Might work well with that 7 cost unit you were mentioning earlier, right? Play this earlier so that you can ping this for 4 and then later attack with it. It'll gain grit and all sorts of craziness. So I could definitely see a combo deck going with this. Just not sure how often his on attack is going to go wild versus him just getting removed before you actually get to do it. So to be seen for me, but I like him. I like the art. Real cool.
I like this card. I think it's very, very cool. I like how they're playing with like the Wookiee theme, right? We've seen Wookiees with grit. This kind of has grit, but not really. Um, I like him. This is another one that I saw and was like, ooh, Grand Inquisitor, because he has 3 or less power and he's got 7 health. So if you can play him and you ready him, right, you can get 2 swings with him and deal like 8 total damage the round he enters play, because you can do 6 to base and 2 to a unit from the Grand Inquisitor ready. And at that point, it's kind of like a mini Vader leader where he's dealing 3 to something and 2 to something else. So I think he's cool. I think he'll work well in Grand Inquisitor, and other decks too. But I think that's just the first one I always think of because he has 3 power.
I like this guy a lot. The card art is fantastic. I know another card we have, the fire spray. It's kind of widely considered that if you don't have the Boba Fett to make it come into play ready, the card's kind of not great. I don't think this card suffers from that drawback because your opponents are not going to want to crash into this guy with their units unless they've got the full 7 attack. And there's not a lot of things that have a full 7 attack. So you play this guy. I mentioned like the opposite of Sentinel earlier, like attack repellent. I think your opponent is not going to want to trade into this guy in pieces to get him cleared unless they can guarantee that they're going to kill him without letting him get that attack. So the turn you play him, even if he doesn't ready, I bet they leave him alone. And then on turn 6, you get to swing into something, potentially kill it, get a little bit of damage, do your Grand Inquisitor shenanigans to stand back up and then attack. Again, using that card we talked about earlier to put 4 damage on this guy. Imagine putting 4 damage on this dude and then being able to swing in with that, plus the damage that he deals for that. So that's 8 out of pocket damage on top of his printed. There's so many fun things that I want to do with this. I will acknowledge 5 starts to be very expensive for an aggressive deck, so I don't know that this guy is going to have a home in like actual aggro. This strikes me as going to be more a card that is going to be kind of part removal in like maybe a mid-range deck that has like a bounty sub-theme. That's kind of the home I think he's going to fall into, but I'm excited to find out. I think this card looks like a lot of fun to play.
Great card to go with McClunky, right? Take a bunch of damage on him, use his attack a couple times, bounce him back to hand, and then play him again, but have him ready. Seems good.
And you deal, another 3 damage from McClunky. So just damage for everybody.
Yeah.
Huge shout out and thanks to FFG and Xander at FFG for providing us a couple cards to preview for the community. They don't have to do that, and they go out of their way to make sure that they're building that relationship with the community. So we very much appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun to talk about what we can do with Kurstadtin. Man, that name is tough.
Make good choices and good luck in your store showdowns.
Fight Chewbacca.
There you go. All right. Well, until next time, we'll see you in the arenas.